Good evening, everybody. Graveless here, bringing you another Terra Invicta tutorial. This time we're going to be talking about weapons. And weapons are pretty tricky to understand simply because of how many different numbers go into them. But there's a simple answer for which ones matter, and we're going to begin doing that by talking about missiles. Because missiles show off more about the complexities of weapons better than any other weapon in the game right now because of how much variety they have. As you can see... Oh, not that. There are so many different types of missiles. And let's start off by, instead of talking about them, talking about damage. Because the ways that damage work actually impact a lot about how we use different weapons in-game. Anytime a weapon, besides a particle beam in a certain situation, but I think it's more a zero multiplier, anyway, deals damage, it does not deal all of that damage directly to armor. Internally, there's two primary damage values you're going to see. Normal damage and chipping damage. Normal damage attempts to penetrate the enemy armor and do damage to the ship's internal health. Chipping damage destroys a certain amount of the enemy armor. The ratio of enemy armor destroyed whenever you get another hit gives you a % chance to ignore all of that armor and do damage straight to the hull. There's some physics reasons why this is true. I think it sort of breaks down when you start getting to hundreds upon hundreds of layers of armor. But the basic idea is that once armor is damaged, it's a lot weaker, and so the next hit that hits that spot directly will go straight through to the internals, because it will just split more of the metal apart. But many of the weapons in game don't tell you what ratio of your damage is regular versus chipping. There is technically a third damage type that mostly doesn't matter. We'll get to that when we get to nuclear missiles. Luckily, missiles do. Welcome to the Humble Crate Missile Bay, the very first missile weapon you get, what you likely will use to shoot down an early game ship with hyper-aggressive strats. We see that we deal 17.5 damage. 80% of which is done to armor. This means that of that 17.5, I'm just going to quickly do math because 17.5 times 0.8 is not something I can easily do in my head. 14 damage will be dealt to armor, and 3 damage will attempt to get through to the enemy's internals. So if the enemy has more than 3 armor, a single hit from a crate will deal 0 true damage to it. But a substantial amount of armor is going to be chipped away. How much? Well, that too is complicated. Regular damage is 1-to-1. Chipping destroys 1 cubic meter of armor, which means that the amount of armor it's destroyed is dependent on the type of armor and the enemy ship size, hence complication. The quick answer is chipping on the nose and tail of the ship are far more effective than chipping on the sides because the nose and the tail are far smaller in terms of surface area than the sides. And another nice thing about the crate that we can discuss is inter-salvo cooldown. This is how long it will wait between salvos to start shooting again, and its salvo is 6 shots over 5 seconds, so slightly more than 1 shot per second. For missiles, we also care about their delta V more than their acceleration. Delta V, as we know from drives, is what is the top speed, because this is the maximum change in velocity you have. And finally, targeting range and magazine. Targeting range is, in Spherical Cow Land, how far away the weapon will be able to target and start shooting. 1,000 is the practical furthest distance that you wind up seeing outside of specific alien ships. However, we get to another complication. Missiles are a kinetic weapon. All kinetic weapons have an expanded targeting range and damage adder based on how fast you're going relative to the enemy, where if you're cruising along at high velocity towards each other, you'll be able to target from further away. And if you're running away from the enemy, or they're running away from you, suddenly you're not necessarily going to be able to target. For missiles, the main 3 missile types we're going to discuss are explosive, frag, and penetrator. All of them benefit from improved targeting range. Frag and Penetrator benefit a lot more from the damage add from relative speed. Or in the case where they're chasing a ship down, take more of a penalty when the ship is running away. That doesn't happen as much. It's usually additive damage. This, last I checked the numbers, was to the tune of explosive missiles, such as our crate, get 10% of the effect that you see in the harder missiles. This is also true of kinetic weapons, whether they be guns, rail guns, or coil guns. It's even true of plasma. Plasma does get a damage amp from your relative velocity, and technically a targeting range amp, but plasma is so good that it doesn't really matter all that much, being completely honest. Anyway, I've rambled on enough about damage and this. The last thing is magazine. This is how many missiles you can carry. This is one of the main reasons why you use the magazine component to improve your total number of missiles. If we want to, let's look at the crate. 17.5 damage compared to our Railgun Mark 1, 2 damage. They use the same slot. This is the main reason why missiles are king, is you get so much more per slot out of missiles than you do out of railguns and coil guns. The railgun's big benefit is it has a 1,000 magazine as compared to our crate missile bay's 12. So if the fight takes more than your full magazine's worth of missiles, well, now it's a dead slot. Bring enough missiles to kill. But let's go over more of the meta picks for missiles and missile upgrades to talk about what's going on with them. The main first upgrade that is recommended is the Artemis torpedo bay. Torpedo versus missile is another dividing line. As you can see here, the crate, we have 6 shots over 5 seconds. Here, we just have a cooldown of 7 seconds. One comes out every 7 seconds. However, it has a delta V of 8. So it will wind up, going more than twice as fast. In general, if something says missile bay, you want to be using this by accelerating at a relatively high velocity and targeting it at a enemy ship that isn't trying to dodge. This is because more shots will be coming in over the same time frame, and it's better at overwhelming enemy PD. If it says torpedo, that means it will go fast enough to actually nail dodgy enemy flankers and any ship that's breaking away from the main formation. It also will have a substantially higher warhead mass, giving it a lot more damage, so it's way more capable of punching through armor. These need to rely on chipping armor and getting crits. These can shoot straight through the armor and just start dealing damage to the ship. Going further up, we have one of the big meta questions that everyone has different opinions on. I forgot to add these. Athena versus Zeus versus Hestia. These three are the main nuclear-powered torpedoes that you want to upgrade to with advanced missile warfare. Hestia has a smaller warhead, but way more delta V at 18.5. Athena used to be the gold standard at 12.8. And then there's Zeus, which might be better than Athena and more recommended. And in order to explain why, it's spreadsheet time. So, up atop, you can see what the different ratios of normal versus chip and the relative velocity bonus that you get for different options. As you can see, regular kinetics. That railgun that supposedly does 3.4 damage. It does not. It does 2.4 damage and 1 point of chipping damage because its 100% is 70 and 30. Plasma deals 20% real damage and 80% chipping damage. A note, if you get a critical hit through armor, all of your damage does get dealt. So there is a benefit there, but if you see this high chipping ratio, you're not getting damage outside of a crit, in which case 100% of the weapon's damage goes through. Explosive missiles are a 2080, much like plasma, but as we see with the Athena here, 336 damage At 20% real damage is 67 real damage. That's more than most armor you're going to wind up seeing on many enemy ships. So that 20%, you'll still do real damage. Frags get 50-50, penetrators get 40-60. I also put on here lasers. Lasers deal barely any chipping. The best laser you're going to see in most cases is going to do less than 5% chipping. The first laser we recommend you use deals 0.03% of its damage as chipping. The rest is all real damage. This is why lasers you really don't, like, they don't chip. If you're trying to chip your way through with pure lasers, just don't. But going down to our table, and this is where Athena versus Zeus is very relevant. This is a table where we're using 48 seconds of shots coming out and hitting the enemy. This is because the 4-slot plasma cannon gets to hit once in that time frame. It's also why plasma's bad, but we'll get to plasma. So Athena versus Zeus. Let's say the enemy has 10 armor. Over this time, Athena will fire 12 missiles, and we're presuming they hit. Zeus will also fire 12 missiles. But dropping the overlay for a sec. Fragmentation missiles take their damage and divide it up into chunks. 1 chunk per 5 kilograms of warhead. I'm going to double check that that's the correct number. It should be the correct number. Yes. So the Zeus torpedo does not deal 1 instance of 2,342 damage. It does 100 instances of 23.4 damage. And bringing the spreadsheet back, we're going to get to why that matters. So, let's say you hit an enemy with 10 armor. This is usually what you're going to get for a side hit on a flanker. Damage through armor for all of this, and this is assuming you get 0 crits. From the Athena would be 688, and the Zeus would be 2,052. Being completely honest, both of these have more than enough damage to completely obliterate any enemy flanker. The Zeus is going to get a little bit more, though. Let's give them instead 50 armor. This is a nose hit against an enemy line ship. Well, the Athena is still getting some damage through per hit. That damage is actually not that likely to kill, though. Like, it might. Like, that would probably kill a battleship or a battle cruiser. It's not going to kill a larger ship. However, look at the amount of chip. The Zeus is going to deal 4, almost 5 times as much chipping damage, making it a lot likelier that it gets a critical hit. Another benefit of the Zeus is each of those 100 hits uses its own chance to deal true damage through. So, more realistically, what you're going to wind up seeing here after a few hits from the Zeus, where the Athena's gotten, let's say 2 of its hits through armor, so it's gotten 34 damage through armor, some of the Zeus is going to start getting true damage in, dealing 11.7 damage straight through, let's say 20%. Equals that times 0.2 times that. Oh my! Well then, that right there is the reason why the Zeus may in fact be a lot better than the Athena, and I'm going to be shifting up my main recommendations from seeing its performance over to the Zeus rather than the Athena. It's still capable of killing the enemy flankers with just 1 hit, and it's far better. Well, 1, it has more Delta V. Going back to here for example, the Zeus is going to be going faster at 13.7 compared to 12.8. It's more likely to get damage through and kill enemy line ships or disable them. And it does sufficient damage to even nail, the small agile guys. So, I think the Zeus is actually strictly better than the Athena. In general recommendation. The only way it wouldn't be, and this is impossible because the aliens don't use it, is if you're up against an enemy ship that has a high amount of armor that is also highly chipping resistant. The aliens literally do not have one of these, so it doesn't matter. But what about the Hestia? The big benefit of the Hestia over the other two is that it has enough delta V that, say you get a lucky crit on your second missile and it blows up the ship. Everything else in that salvo will retarget and hit another ship very reliably. If you're really lucky, the Hestia can also sometimes make a second pass at the first ship you threw it after. So it's its own beast, but yeah, upon running the numbers, Zeus over Athena. Over here we have the upgraded missiles that you may want to use, the Copperhead into the Lancehead. This is probably still better than running Zeus against enemy line ships, because it's way more reliably going to be able to do PD. But Graveless, you ask, what about that third damage type and nuclear missiles you were saying? Well, nuclear damage is shredding damage, which does all of its damage to armor and obliterates layers. This does not matter. And the reason why this does not matter is because the weakest nuclear missile torpedo does 56 million damage. Any enemy is just going to kill it. Period. Like, nothing survives this. So let's talk about where you actually want to get things in nukes, because the problem is they have a very low magazine and relatively low delta V, so they're easy to PD. Nukes have a blast damage fall-off radius. This is how far away from the enemy ship they deal damage. It falls off at r squared, because that's how spherical fall-off goes. As you progress up the tech tree, you will start getting to shaped nukes. This does a cone of destruction. Where's the first one? Yeah, I think Olympus is the first one. Destruction cone, 2 degrees, funneling all of that. Damage fall off, 93 kilometers. That might hit something. But if we go look at particle point defense, defensive targeting range, 200 kilometers. You'd have to get far enough in that it's not shooting at max distance. Acheron shaped. 124 kilometers. It's better. It's getting there. Tartarus shaped, 149. Styx shaped, 219. The Styx nuclear torpedo is the best missile weapon in the game, because even if it gets hit by point defense, it still deals damage to its target. And it deals enough damage to its target that only heavily armored enemy heavy ships are going to be able to not die if they get caught in this blast radius. Now, really long range targeting, so defensive targeting range, 200 kilometers would still get hit. If you're up against enemies using, like, their nose slot lasers for defense, the Styx might not be able to actually get there. But man, is this... The aliens will do this, but it's not honestly all that likely, especially if you have anything else distracting them. These things are nuts. They are truly nuts. If you want the strongest weapon in the game, it is this. There's also antimatter torpedoes. They're bad. Don't use them. This is because they're not shaped. So they have the same problem that regular nukes do, in addition to costing you antimatter, and, like, they do have a lot of delta V. I will give them that. They have a huge amount of delta V compared to the Styx. Or anything else, but, like, they're not shaped. Don't use them, they're bad. Moving on to other kinetics, though. There's a general trend in kinetics, which is the 1-slot battery is worse than the 2-slot battery, is worse than the 4-slot battery. But what about the nose cannon, you may ask? Well, this is true of kinetics in general, is the 4-slot battery is better than the 1-slot nose cannon, assuming you get through PD. This is, of course, an assumption. then the 2-slot cannon winds up generally being better, and the 3-slot cannon than the 4-slot cannon. This is the main reason, other main reason why we don't tend to recommend using kinetics in the early game. Going back to my spreadsheet. Let's compare, this is the Mark III 1-slot rail battery. Let's compare that to the Athena. The amount of damage done and damage chipped in the same amount of time. It's pretty sad. It's really sad. Now, these 1-slot batteries have a point. They can overwhelm enemy PD to let the much nicer 3-slot rail cannon actually get hits in. And this is where this is relevant versus the Athena. Let's say you're shooting an enemy line ship. Over the, you have rail batteries that don't matter, and you have a 3-slot rail cannon coming in and smacking the enemy, while the Athenas also would be. This 57.9 is actually pretty close to this, it's 4 times as much, but this is real damage getting in that is going to swiftly kill the enemy ship. If we go down to 10 points of armor, the Zeus is going to overwhelm, but this is still pretty relevant. If we go up to 100 points of armor, none of these are dealing damage. But this is where kinetics come in, is they start hitting and they keep hitting. Because once you start blowing into the middle of the enemy ship, you're turning off their PD and you're killing them. Swapping back instead, and this is where the game used to be. Instead, if we compare this to the heavy siege coiler that deals 362 base damage. So I'm just going to put this in here. This is not it. Look at that for, it also does shoot less often. 24 seconds, so it would only get 2 shots in. 3-slot siege. That, against a 50 enemy nose armor, is getting way more damage into the guts of the enemy ship than the Athena. We go up to 100 nose armor. Still getting real damage in. That's still enough to maybe one-shot a ship. And this is the reason why the second thing that happens with kinetics is you frequently upgrade your nose to the heavy siege coiler. There's arguments for the heavy coil cannon. You can go either way. If you like the heavy coil cannon to also snipe flankers, I'm not going to say you're making a bad choice. But this thing just tears through enemy armor and destroys ships as soon as one shot gets in. And then there's Plasma, which is technically a kinetic. As said, Plasma does a lot of chipping damage. Let's go back to our spreadsheet again. 50 enemy armor. Here's our Plasma batteries for how much chipping damage they get in over that same period of time. Now, these are always going to hit, and that's the advantage to Plasma, is it is unstoppable. If you fire Plasma at an enemy ship for long enough, that enemy ship is just going to die, because it will get chipped, it will get crit, and then it will be dead. It's not very good. It's not very good because its rate of fire is so bad. And its chipping damage, even though it does a lot of chipping damage, is so bad relative to anything else you might be hitting the enemy ship with, besides lasers and particle beams. You can win with Plasma. It's not great. It really ain't great. Going back to lasers, though. Laser slot sizes, they follow the same trend kinetics do. 1-slot battery is less than 2-slot battery, is less than 1-slot nose, is less than 4-slot battery, then 2-slot, then 3-slot, then 4-slot nose. Lasers, however, also have 2 other variants. They have color, and they have type is what I'm going to call it. So starting with color. Human lasers go from infrared to green to ultraviolet. As you scale up in color, so we are going to compare a 1-slot infrared laser to a 1-slot green laser. They do the same amount of damage, but the green laser is a lot better at armor penetrating. Note, a 1-slot green laser is still not good at armor penetration. a complicated thing with lasers is that this armor effectiveness value is true but lying to you. When you compare lasers to armor values, you do not take the main armor value, you have to amplify the armor value to the power of 1.5. This is because, roughly, kinetics, if they hit metal, they're going to plow into the metal and sink deep, and push more metal out of the way. Lasers vaporize the metal, and then you have a cloud of liquid and molten metal coming out of the hole. The laser needs to continuously push through this, even though it's already broken some of the armor. And this is the physics justification for why that value is there. I think this might be in the codex somewhere. It's something that wound up getting derived on the Terra Invicta Discord. I'm kind of annoyed at this. So you see 10 damage against 86% at 600 kilometers. You may think that, oh, that means that 600 kilometers I can pen 8.6, or that if I hit with 10 armor with this at 600 kilometers, 1.4 damage will get through. This is not true because of that armor amp. There's a laser spreadsheet. I will link it in the comments. Look at this for all your laser needs. But that is not all. Lasers also have their type advantage. So UV laser to UV arc laser. Cooldown, 30 seconds to 20 seconds. That's a 50% damage increase right there. It also gets better armor penetration. And this is really nice. Go up to phaser. Even better. This is 3 times the DPS as the regular laser cannon, and twice that of the arc laser just for upgrading to phasers. Phasers outside of IR crossed exotics, and this is where the fact that there's 2 upgrade trees matters. Think of IR phasers as level 1 plus level 3. Theoretically adds up to 4. UV arcs are level 2 plus level 3 adds up to 5. Green arcs are 2 plus 2, and indeed, if we check infrared phaser cannon compared to green arc laser cannon, these are pretty comparable. The green gets slightly more armor pen, the phaser gets its much better cooldown, but they're pretty comparable. The UV arc laser cannon, on the other hand, is just better than the IR phaser. And the UV phaser is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. This is arguably humanity's most powerful weapon. Then we get to particle beams. And a lot of these rules that we talked about have to get thrown out the window. And let me just put some of these on my ship to explain why. Here's our particle nose. Let us add a... so particle beams start at E-beamers, then go up to ions, then particles, then antiparticles, and there is also the Spinal Neutron lance, which is a side grade to antiparticles. E-beamers are pretty bad, don't use them. Ions are usable, but due to how particle damage fall-off works, you really don't want to. I would recommend using particle beams as your first particle weapon. And these are in fact comparable to green arc lasers for a fraction of the research price. I'm going to go look that up right now. The particle lance winds up running you approximately 53,000 research points throughout the tree. Green arc cannons wind up running you 90k. So you can get this, which performs comparably to green arcs for half the research. They're great. So heavy particle lance are no... particles do still have the 1 slot, 2 slot, 4... at the particles we use, we have 2 slot, 4 slot, and nose. 2 slot does 2 damage at 600 kilometers. 4 slot, by comparison, does 4 damage at 700. So 4 slot, twice as good as 2 slot. That's peculiar compared to where we were on our other weapons. What about this 2 slot nose? Where is she? There she is. Oh, only 3. Wait a minute. That is a lot better. That's 50% more in comparable range, and this is not that much better. Turns out that due to complicating factors, the 4-slot particle battery is better than the 2-slot nose. This is actually pretty nice in regards to disabling ships. Particles also fire out a salvo, so 1 shot roughly every other second, and then for 9 seconds, and then there's a 20-second cooldown as opposed to lasers, which fire continuously. So like the 3-slot nose is actually pretty substantially better than the 4-slot battery. It's 50% again more damage, and a hefty 200 extra kilometers targeting range, which is nice. But this is the reason why, for weird reasons, your best particle ship is actually the battleship, not the battle cruiser. You run a 4-slot hull and a 2-slot nose. Pretend this is a battleship for a second. The 2-slot batteries are a lot lower targeting range, but due to how damage works in particles, they do different things. So, 2 damage. You would think, oh, 2 damage. Every bit of armor is going to stop that. Well, particles use their own damage calculation. Rather than armor subtracting from their damage, instead, armor is a divisor. This damage value is going to be hit by 1/16 normally. Then there is a points to have X-ray or baryonic damage. Particles have their 100% damage split up between thermal, which tries to do real damage and fails because it can't, mostly. X-ray and baryonic, which go straight in and disable enemy systems. If these get low enough, then the system gets repaired before anything bad happens. But if it's not sufficiently low, and I find that like 1/100th of a point of damage is roughly the point where it will get repaired faster than any issues will occur. And that is roughly, let me see how many halvings that is. 2 over 2 times 0.5 power of x. Sorry, I just realized I had to do a bit more. And I found that this is roughly 4 2 damage, 7 halvings. So, 4 are innately there. With adamantine armor, to get up to 7, you would need another 7 halvings, another 120 points. 4 is twice as many as 2. So in order to nullify this, you would need an additional 34 layers of adamantine armor. If we go up to this, 6 is 3 times as much. The 4 slot is 12. That's 6 times 2. And you can see how this makes things more complicated in regards to how much armor is enough to stop it. Alien exotic armor, on the other hand, is a bitch. So again, 4 halvings are free, so this needs to go up to 24 layers before it starts doing anything. This will rapidly shut down... alien exotic armor, as opposed to adamantine armor, will rapidly shut down any hull particle beam. Let's look at this lovely anti-particle nose beam. The 16 damage. And also, you will notice, anti-particles damage sums to more than 100%. Anti-particle beams are wild. And they eventually will stop being able to shut down enemy systems through sufficient alien exotic armor. But you're looking at, let's see here, so 16, and unlike this, which only does, 34 and 6, let's compare the 3-slot particle nose. All right, actually, let's just go to Lancer. Let's go to Lancer to do the right. So, 12 damage at 34%. 16 damage at 119%. We're doing Norvarion right now and just do this. Functionally speaking, the anti-particle beam is 4, So like 6 times as good as the particle beam. Baryonic, it's another like 8. Like this is ridiculously better. Anti-particle beams can in fact penetrate up through something like, I think I found that 120 points of alien exotic armor is what you needed to stop the anti-particle beam. And it does a relevant amount of like real damage through thermal damage too. So it will get real damage into the enemy ship. Unlike the others, which will get fractions of damage that will quickly get repaired. The anti-particle beam, then there's the Spinal Neutron Lance that does 28 damage, 100% baryon. I like the anti-particle beam more, but like, you can like the baryon. Or the Spinal Neutron Lance, that's fine. If you say you like that better, I'm not gonna argue. It's alright. Anyway. That is the quick TLDR of how all weapons work. I say quick, it's still taking me about half an hour because there's a ton of weapons in this game. For the quick one at the end, Kinetics very rapidly will chip away at armor, allow you to get crits and kill the enemy ship. Missiles are better than Kinetics until they run out of ammo, and then they deal 0 damage. Oh, I suppose I should probably mention point defense. Point defense weapons are all batteries. They start out with the humble 40mm, which is great at anti-kinetics and can do damage via a ton of chipping. This thing only does damage via chipping and crits, but or insane velocity adding damage to it. There exists a point defense mode on 1 slot, coil batteries and rail batteries. Use a 40mm instead. Lasers have point defense lasers. The thing about these is they need to deal enough damage to blow something up, and they have a pretty hefty cooldown. Note the 40mm cooldown. 6 shots over 3.8 seconds. 1 shot over 5 seconds. Arc lasers start getting pretty good, and phasers are very good. Don't use 1-slot lasers or don't use lasers or particle beams that are offensive slots for PD. It's just a bad idea. Defensive targeting range, 200. Defensive targeting range, 135. 1 shot every 3 seconds. 1 shot every 10 seconds. This is just better. But there is also particle point defense. Point defense ion battery. This is the single best thing you're going to get against missiles for a long time. And then there's 2 antimatter point defense batteries. Do not use the 4-slot one. Use 2 of the 2-slot ones. You get twice as many shots at like 2/3 the range, but range does not matter that much for this purpose. These are actually pretty good. Against missiles, or against enemy missiles in particular, they outdo phaser PD. Against enemy kinetics, arc laser PD is better. However, these are better. Unboosted, these wind up beating their laser equivalents. So, like, if you are using a particle beam ship, use the antimatter point defense battery on it. Because you're going to be boosting that with cyclotrons. Like, basically just match your offensive weapon to the defensive weapon in regards to what point defense you use. And don't forget, everyone needs their own 40mm for self-defense. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to post a quick TLDR for a lot of this in the comment, or rather in the video description. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. I tried to get as much information into a quick video as I could, but there's a ton of information needed to properly analyze weapons in this game. TLDR is also going to be in there, and see you guys next time. Bye!